Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven, and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some pro-revenge stories, and our first story of the day is by ROK Expat, How I Got Our Translator Fired. I was working a job that had me operating in one of our offices overseas. We would have business expenses, and those receipts would be in the language of the country we were in, obviously. Those expenses were for things like printer ink, office equipment, cleaning services, marketing costs, all pretty standard stuff. Well, around this time, we got a new VP over our region who worked out of head office in LA. This VP came up with this brilliant idea to hire a translator to translate all of the receipts to make sure we weren't sneaking in BS. Fair enough. However, the issue that arose was that we had to send our expenses to the translator, who would translate the receipt, then submit for reimbursement. The problem was this translator was a real Karen type. She would demand better scans of the receipts, oftentimes after we had already thrown it away. She would argue if we really got the best deal on whatever we bought. I remember in one transaction, on about $200 of ink cartridges, she asked me why I didn't order online from this common website, to which I said they were out of stock at the time and we needed the ink, so we bought from a local store. To which she said I was spending too much money, to which I said it's none of your concern, your job is to translate the receipt. To which she said if I want her to submit my expenses I need to be nice to her. To which I said she needs to learn her place, she's a translator, not a VP, that gets to instruct me what to do. After this encounter, she started being extra anal with my expenses, so one day I came in the office early to call her and try to work things out. She basically told me that I screwed up by pissing her off, and she expected my expense reports to be perfect or she wouldn't submit them unless they were. I told her if she keeps this up, she won't have a job much longer. She laughed and wished me well and hung up. A few months later, we had our annual meeting in LA, and after the meeting, we were at a bar and I walked up to our VP and started up a conversation. I steered the conversation to expenses, and I asked him how much in monthly expenses did he typically reimburse us for in the country we worked out of. He said about $3,000 to $4,000. I acted surprised and asked, "Is that all?" He goes, "Yeah." To clarify, that $3,000 to $4,000 is the typical spend, and he says, yeah, it rarely gets above $4,000. So we ask him about how Karen, our translator, is doing. He says she's doing a good job, and I nod my head and I go, how much fraudulent expenses has she caught? It's important to note, every employee that was submitting expenses was well paid. They'd be awfully stupid trying to skim some extra dollars via fraudulent expense reports. He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you hired her to ensure all the expenses you were reimbursing us for are legitimate, right? Her job is to translate them for you, correct?" He says it is, and I ask, "So is it safe to presume that you've done that to ensure people aren't submitting BS expenses?" He says, "You could say that." I smile and ask, "So, how much in fraudulent expenses has she caught?" He thinks for a moment and goes, "I don't think she's caught any." So I ask, "And how much do we pay her?" He says it depends on her workload, but between $2,500 to $3,000 a month. I smile and ask, "Does it make sense to pay someone $3,000 a month to translate $3,000 in receipts?" "Well, she ensures we aren't getting fraudulent expenses." And I counter, "Well, you said she hasn't counted any in the last 9 months, and the expenses are always between $3,000 to $4,000, so as long as the expenses stay in that range, wouldn't it be safe to assume that the expenses are legitimate? And couldn't you bring on a translator on a contract basis if they get out of hand?" He sees my point. And imagine the cost savings. We would probably save over $40,000 a year. That's a good chunk of change, isn't it? The VP tries to defend his position, "But she does a good job." And I counter, "But you could frame this as you've saved us $40,000 a year and created a baseline to judge expenses by. Cutting costs is always good for the bottom line and the end-of-year bonuses, isn't it?" For your information, I knew that a major percentage of VP comp package with the company had to do with the company's margin at the end of the year. The bigger the margin, the bigger the bonus. You can see the twinkle in his eye. We carry on the rest of the night. A few weeks later, we get an email from the VP saying that we are to submit all of our expenses directly to the admin for reimbursement and that we have let go of Karen. So if you put yourself in OP's shoes here and you manage to get this Karen fired, do you send some kind of snarky text or email or something out to Karen personally, just kind of a subtle letting them know that you talked to the VP and maybe referencing that conversation you had earlier about how they're not going to have a job much longer? Or do you just take the victory of it and move on without saying anything? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Vatican Cameo 714. Tree trimmer tried to rob my grandfather, so I shut down his tree service altogether. My grandfather was born in 1928 and has always been a hardworking but simple man. At 90 years old, he was still very spry and self-reliant. He could clean for himself and cook for himself, but only simple meals. So he lived with my wife and our children to ensure his diet was balanced and to have company, as well as someone to take him to appointments. Being fresh out of college, we couldn't buy the house ourselves, so my mom owned it and we took care of it. There was a dead tree in the side yard that we planned to take care of before the end of summer. It just wasn't a high priority. That's what caught the attention of this sleazy tree trimmer who was doing door-to-door services. He knocked on our door and offered to take care of the tree, cut it down, and haul away all the wood. I had the initial reaction to decline. I didn't know this guy or his work. I also hadn't spoken to the owner of the property to see how she wanted to take care of it. My grandfather, always eager to help, joined me at the door and asked what was going on. Despite my objections, he immediately agreed with this random guy and paid in full for him to cut down the tree and remove everything. After about an hour and a half, the guy knocks on the door again to tell us he'll need help to haul away, so he will be back to clean up the mess tomorrow. I wasn't happy, but fine. By this point, I have already told my mother what's going on and called her back to update. For 3 days, we didn't see hide or hair of the guy, the grass growing as it does in early summer under the complete disaster of wood chunks he left behind. It looked like the tree had exploded, the pieces too big for me to move and store on my own. Also, he had already been paid to finish the job. My mom and I were on the phone every day discussing what we should do. The thing is, the guy foolishly gave me his card with his company's Facebook page, and I was just itching to use the information. My mom was finally able to get a hold of him, and he gave every excuse about not being able to make it back. He agreed to be there the next day, but didn't show up. He promised again, and again, a no-show. Then he started to ignore my mother as well as my calls, so my mom had had enough. She told me to handle it, and boy did I. I got on Facebook, immediately searched his page and took some screenshots. On any and every for sale page I could join in the area, I posted the screenshots, linked his page, and unleashed a rant about this bozo ripping off my World War II veteran grandfather. The flood of righteous anger was almost immediate. Lots of people even offered to come finish the job for free as a favor to my grandfather. It didn't take long for the guy to see the posts, and he sent his wife to threaten me with legal action if I didn't take them down. This is slander. I spoke to my attorneys and we are going to press charges if you don't remove this post immediately. Everything I posted here is the truth. The service was paid in full, but the job is only partially done, and no one has been willing to answer our calls for nearly a week. It's not slander if it's true. She then said she would sue me for stealing their photos, and I encouraged her to call the police. Then I started getting interesting messages. Apparently, this guy was a second-generation con man. His dad is currently serving prison time for doing this exact same thing to too many people. At least half a dozen other customers sent me messages to tell me their experiences with the guy and his father that match my own, if not worse. I screen capped bits of messages that clearly displayed the guy's behavior without doxing the senders and posted them in the comments of my posts. The guy's wife came back trying to discredit me. She demanded to know who let the old man pay for a tree he didn't own. She tried to turn it around like I took advantage of my grandpa and now I'm trying to pin it on someone else. The last comment I made to her said, "So wait, Are you admitting that your husband cut down a tree on private property without the permission of the landowner? That's criminal vandalism." I didn't hear anything else from her after that. But the guy finally called my mom back to whine about my posts and how they're hurting his business. He claimed he had 2 customers demand a refund and another canceled the estimate appointment, all because of what they saw on Facebook. He demanded I take them down or he wouldn't finish the job. It had been about 2 weeks since he cut down the tree at this point. My mother informed him that that would be a breach of contract and he's already been paid to finish the job. She agreed she would have me take the posts down when the job was finished. He showed up the next day with everything he needed, but told my mother he didn't want to see me, so she had to be on the property to meet him. Wussy. About halfway through, Mom had to leave and asked me to stay outside and watch him. Hee, but of course, Mother. The tree was a bit downhill from the front door, so I stood on the stoop with my arms crossed like a darned overseer, watching this idiot begrudgingly finish the job he had started so long ago. It was funny to watch him get tangled in the tall grass. At one point, he tripped and got so angry he tried to kick the grass and fell on his bum. He finished up without a word to any of us and had all the stuff packed when he turned to snap a photo of the now empty area. Later, I found that photo on his page with the caption, "Finished the job for the World War II veteran." Apparently, people had been watching his page with interest, and when he made a post that implied disrespect toward a 90-year-old veteran, the whole of angry white ladies on Facebook let him have it. By the next morning, the caption was gone, but the photo remained. I did take my posts down, still feeling victorious. Out of curiosity the next year, I searched his page again and saw they had not posted since that photo. The page had been active for about 4 years, and now it is completely silent. From what I heard, no one has been willing to hire him since. Although people haven't necessarily been very willing to hire them, I'm not sure if I would classify this as pure pro-revenge, just in the sense that it in theory shouldn't have had lasting consequences on their job considering they took the post down, and all OP really got was waiting 2 weeks for the guy to actually finish the job. But hey, sometimes that mob of old Karens on Facebook can be pretty effective. And our final story of the day is by a lemur named Simon. Give me a huge task to do on my last day at work. Okay, I'll leave it unfinished. My last day at work was last week. I had been with this organization for 2.5 years. I loved working here and always gave my absolute best, but unfortunately, I had a supervisor who was absolutely biased and favored incompetent employees over me. The problem is that, before her, I worked under another supervisor and he trained me in all sorts of tasks before he left. When my current supervisor took his role, she didn't train each team member evenly and instead made each worker specialize in certain tasks. This would then lead to me receiving more work than others because I know how to get everything done, whereas my team members didn't. I realized that I had had enough and that I should move into another role. Because this was a federal government job, I had to fill out so many forms and get many things done on my last day. On my last day, my supervisor was working from home, and on top of the stuff I had to complete before I leave, she decided to give me 2 big tasks: booking travel and accommodation for 2 trips, and this requires a massive formal process and so many forms to sign. No one else in my team does the travel tasks because they were always assigned to me. After being annoyed for a couple minutes, I decided to leave it and not start on the task. Otherwise, I would have left work 2 hours after my normal finishing time. That same evening, while I was having farewell drinks with my colleagues, I live in a country where COVID is under great control, I told them how I had 2 outstanding travel tasks that I couldn't attend to because I was already busy finalizing everything. One of my team members said, "Why didn't supervisor give that task to me? I literally had nothing to do today." As if that didn't annoy me already, I also remembered that my supervisor did not even send me a thank you / good luck / farewell email before she logged off. Oh well, doesn't matter. The next morning, my supervisor would have clocked into an unfinished task with no one assigned to it because they weren't fully trained on it. A good start to a Monday. This one definitely falls completely on the supervisor's shoulders. Who gives 2 massive tasks to a person on their very last day working for you? Just the overall etiquette of it is ridiculous. I would have done exactly the same as OP and dipped as soon as my shift was up. I ain't gonna give you 2 free hours on my very last day working for you. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So, until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.